Greetings, listeners. I have a new life story that I've brought to life for you. Enjoy watching it.
I never thought I would hear from my own wife that I was costing her dearly, especially after my adopted daughter sold her car and scraped together her savings to save me. $15,000 for heart surgery seemed too high a price to pay for my life, but the death of my husband and father was a perfectly acceptable scenario. To understand how it came to this nightmare, we need to start at the beginning. My name is Mike Jalinghelm. I'm 48 years old, and until the day the doctor told me about the surgery, I considered myself a happy family man. I've been an electrician in Milwaukee for 25 years. I make good money, my hands are good, my customers are happy. I get up at 6 in the morning, breakfast oatmeal with black coffee, go to work in my old Ford pickup truck, which I bought back in 2010. Waiting for me at home are my wife Lisa, her mother Barbara, and our adopted daughter Cassie. Lisa works at First National Bank as a credit counselor, a good position and a decent salary. We were married 11 years ago when we were both 37. She is a beautiful woman, shoulder-length brown hair, brown eyes, slim figure, which she maintains by yoga and jogging. Lately, though, she'd been a little distant, but I put that down to the stress of working at the bank. Barbara moved in 3 years ago after her father-in-law died. She is 64 years old, retired, but she used to work as a chief accountant in a construction firm. She's a woman of principle, always in control, always interfering. Sometimes I think she thinks I am unworthy of her daughter, but I try not to pay attention. After all, she's lost her husband. She's worried. She needs family support. Cassie's a different story. We adopted her 20 years ago when she was only 4 years old. The girl's parents, distant relatives of Lisa, were killed in a car accident on the highway between Milwaukee and Madison. There was no one to take the children, and Lisa and I were a young couple at the time, ready to help. Cassie is now 24 years old and has been a nurse at the city hospital for 3 years. Smart, calm, very responsible woman. She has blonde hair, which she always wears in a ponytail, and serious blue eyes. She went through a lot in her early childhood, but she grew up strong and independent. I've grown more attached to this girl than I expected. She has become a real daughter to me. She lives with us for now, saving money for her own apartment, drives a Honda Accord 2015, which she bought on credit after getting a job. Our house on Maryland Avenue is small but cozy. We bought it 12 years ago with a mortgage that we're still paying off. 3 bedrooms upstairs, living room and kitchen downstairs, small backyard with grill and garden furniture. Write in the comments, where are you hearing this story from and what time is it? Maybe someone is on their way to work and someone is already settled in at home after a hard day. And have you faced situations when the closest people showed their true face at a critical moment? Give us a like and subscribe to find out how ordinary family relationships fall apart when it comes to the real trials. I have a workshop in my basement where I repair electronics for my neighbors in my spare time. Extra money never hurts, especially with 3 women in the house. The work of an electrician is physically demanding, but I love it. There's something soothing about tinkering with wiring, finding the problem and fixing it. Everything is logical, everything is understandable. If a light bulb doesn't light up, it means there's an open circuit or short circuit somewhere. You find the place, fix it, and the light comes on. It's a pity that human relationships don't work according to the same simple laws. In recent months, I've started to notice that I'm more tired than usual. Climbing stairs at construction sites or high-rise buildings, I felt shortness of breath. Sometimes I felt a pang in my chest, but I put it down to age, stress, and a lot of work. Men in our family have always been strong. My grandfather lived to the age of 83, my father to 79. I was counting on the same genetics and was not going to run to the doctors for every ailment. That all changed on Monday morning. I was working at a site in the center of town, changing electrical wiring in an old office building built in the 60s. I went up to the 4th floor with a box of tools and suddenly felt my heart beat unevenly, like a motor with a faulty ignition system. The pain in my chest became sharper, and my left arm went numb from shoulder to fingertips. I had to crouch right on the stairs. My colleague Steve Martinez, with whom we had worked together for 5 years, noticed that I was pale as chalk. He's an experienced guy who's seen a lot of construction. "Mike, are you sick?" he asked, coming closer. "You don't look so good." My blood pressure must have spiked, I said, trying to stand up, or I ate too much breakfast. Come on, Steve shook his head. You don't mess with your heart. My father was 45 when he had his heart attack. He said the same thing. Pressure, overwork, barely saved him. He insisted I see a doctor immediately, even drove me to St. Luke's in his pickup truck. Told my boss that we were having technical problems with the equipment and there was definitely no work for half a day. At the hospital, I was seen by a cardiologist doctor. Anderson, a man in his 50s with a gray beard and attentive brown eyes. He ordered a cardiogram, echocardiography, and blood tests for enzymes and cholesterol. I spent most of the day in the hospital, going from one office to the next, answering the same questions from the nurses about my well-being and family medical history. By 5 p.m., all the results were in. Doctor. Anderson invited me into his office, a small room with a window to the courtyard, where diplomas and commendations from charitable foundations hung on the walls. On the desk was a picture of his family, his wife and 2 teenagers on a beach somewhere warm, all smiling for the camera. Have a seat, Mr. Jellinghell, the doctor said, opening the thick folder with my tests. We need to have a serious talk. I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk and braced myself for bad news. The look on the doctor's face made it clear that he wasn't going to tell me anything good. You have a serious cardiovascular problem, he began, showing me the black and white scans. Coronary artery disease, critical narrowing of the arteries. See those dark areas on the cardiogram? The blood flow to the heart muscle is severely compromised. I looked at the weird zigzags and blotches on the paper, and I didn't understand anything. To me, they were just lines and squiggles with no meaning. What does it mean exactly? I asked. It means you need emergency surgery. Aortocoronary bypass. We take a healthy vessel from your leg and create a bypass route for blood that bypasses the damaged coronary arteries. In other words, we build a new road to bypass the traffic jam. The word surgery sounded like a judgment call. Is it, very dangerous? I asked, although I already knew the answer from the doctor's face. Any open heart surgery carries certain risks, but modern cardiac surgery has reached a high level. The problem is different. Without this operation, your condition will only worsen. A heart attack could happen at any time, and the next one will likely be fatal. My mouth was dry. I swallowed and asked the question that had been tormenting me since the beginning of the conversation. How much does it cost? Dr. Anderson looked at me with understanding. He was clearly used to such questions from middle-class patients. $15,000 including all procedures and rehabilitation. Your health insurance will only cover the basic portion, about $5,000. The rest you'll have to pay out of your own pocket. But Mr. Jellinghell, we're talking about your life. You can't put things like this on hold. $15,000. I did a quick mental calculation of our family finances. We had about $3,000 in our current account, with about $2,000 more in the rainy day fund. We were more than half of that amount short of the $15,000 we needed. It was necessary to talk to the family, to find a way out of the situation. How quickly should I do the operation? I asked. Ideally, within a month, at most a month and a half. I'll give you a referral to a cardiac surgeon, Dr. Patrick Connolly. He's one of the best specialists in the state, working at the Cardiac Center at University Hospital. Make an appointment for a consultation as soon as possible. I took the referrals, test results, and a discharge summary with recommendations. My hands trembled slightly as I folded all the documents into a large envelope. In the morning, I was just an ordinary electrician with minor health problems, but now I was a man in urgent need of a complicated $15,000 heart surgery. On the bus ride home, I pondered how best to break the news to Lisa and Barbara. Surely they would understand the gravity of the situation. Of course, we'd find a way to get the missing money. We could take out a consumer loan, borrow from friends and colleagues, sell the car and some things. The main thing is not to panic and act reasonably and consistently. The house smelled deliciously of fried chicken with spices and baked vegetables. Barbara was cooking dinner in the kitchen. Lisa was sitting at the dining room table with her laptop, studying some bank documents or reports. Cassie was reading a medical journal in the living room, researching new treatments. She was always inquisitive about professional matters. Hi, everyone, I said, hanging my jacket on the hook by the front door. How was your day? Normal, Lisa replied, not even lifting her head from the screen. You came early today. Did something happen? Yes, I had to go to the doctor. Now she raised her head and looked at me carefully. Barbara turned away from the stove where she was frying potato wedges. Cassie put the magazine aside. A doctor's appointment? My mother-in-law asked. What's wrong? Blood pressure again? I sat down at the table across from Lisa, placing the envelope of medical records in front of me. Not pressure, I said. There's a heart problem. Serious problems. The silence that hung after my words about heart problems lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Lisa slowly closed her laptop. Barbara turned off the burner under the frying pan and turned to face me. Cassie set aside the medical journal and looked at me carefully. She was always sensitive to changes in the atmosphere of the house. What do you mean, serious problems? Oh, Lisa asked, and I heard irritation in her voice, rather than concern, as if I'd reported some minor annoyance that would disrupt her plans for the evening. I took the test results out of the envelope and placed them on the table. The black and white images of the cardiogram looked ominous in the light of the kitchen lamp. Coronary insufficiency. Arteries are critically narrowed. The doctor says without surgery, he could have a heart attack at any moment, and the next one would be fatal. Barbara walked over to the table, picked up one of the scans and scrutinized it, though I doubted she understood anything about medical records. She always liked to show her competence in all matters, even those where her knowledge was superficial. What does this doctor propose to do? She asked in the tone one would use to inquire about the cost of plumbing repairs. Orthocoronary bypass, open heart surgery. They'll take a vessel from her leg and create a bypass route for the blood, bypassing the damaged arteries. Cassie frowned as she considered my words. As a nurse, she understood the seriousness of the situation better than anyone. Daddy, what does the cardiologist say about the prognosis? She asked. How much time do we have to prepare? A month and a half tops. We need to make an appointment with the surgeon as soon as possible. Jesus. Lisa ran her hand through her hair and sighed heavily. And how much does it cost? Here we got to the main question. I understood that $15,000, a serious amount of money for our family, but we were talking about my life. Don't they understand priorities? 15,000. Insurance would only cover 5. Barbara dropped the photograph onto the table as if it had burned her fingers. She had an expression on her face that I'd only seen when she knew about a big unplanned expense, like when the washing machine broke 3 years ago. $15,000, she asked, and there was more than surprise in her voice. Mike, do you realize what kind of money you're talking about? Of course I do. This is my life we're talking about. It's about money we don't have, Barbara said stiffly. We're not millionaires to throw that kind of money around. I looked at Lisa, expecting my wife to stand up for me, or at least support me. But she was silent, looking at her nails with a neat French manicure, which she did in the salon every 2 weeks for $80. We could take out a loan, I suggested, trying to speak calmly. Or sell something. The car, for instance. It's still running. They'll give us $7,000 or $8,000 for it. What credit? Barbara shook her hands as if I'd suggested something completely absurd. Look at our income. You have a job as an electrician, not an oil magnate. Lisa in the bank gets good, but not enough to pay off $15,000 in loans. Mom's right, Lisa finally spoke up, still not looking up from her hands. We're barely making ends meet as it is. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, gasoline, insurance. Where's all this money coming from? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My family was discussing my health as if they were talking about buying a new TV or an expensive vacation that they could easily pass up. Lisa, I could die, I said slowly, emphasizing each word. The doctor explained very clearly. A heart attack can happen at any time. The next one will be fatal. We're all going to die someday, Barbara said philosophically, pursing her lips. But that doesn't mean you have to go broke for every disease. We have to be realistic. Cassie abruptly got up from the living room couch and walked over to us. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. She clearly hadn't expected to hear such words from people she considered family. Barbara, how can you say that? She said quietly but clearly. This is about Dad's life. It's about money we can't afford to spend, Barbara replied coldly. You're young. You don't understand financial responsibility. I understand family, Cassie replied sharply, and I understand that when someone in the family is sick, the rest of the family has to help. Help, yes, but reasonably, within our means. Barbara sat down in the chair across from me and folded her arms across her chest in her characteristic pose of someone ready to give a long lecture. Cassie, you've only been a nurse for 3 years. You have no idea how much it costs to keep a house, a family, pay all the bills. Can't you find the money? Cassie asked, turning to Lisa. Couldn't you borrow from relatives? Or a coworker? Who? Barbara interrupted her sharply. Neighbors? Friends? Who would lend $15,000 to a simple electrician? And most importantly, who would pay it back? I'll pay it back, I said firmly, feeling anger rising in my chest. As soon as I get better, I'll find an extra job. I'll work weekends, evenings. If you get better, my mother-in-law said grimly, and if the operation goes badly, if there are complications, and if you become an invalid, then we will be left with debts and without a breadwinner. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. No breadwinner. So Barbara was already considering my death as more acceptable than family debt. I was a source of income for them, a line item in the family budget, not a living person. Mom, don't say that, Lisa objected weakly, but without much conviction in her voice. Why am I wrong? Barbara turned to her daughter. Let's talk honestly, without sentimentality. Mike has been an electrician for 25 years. How much has he accumulated in that time? Where are his savings? Where are the investments? Where's the financial cushion for a rainy day? I could feel the blood rushing to my face from her words, but I tried to stay calm. Cassie stood beside me, putting her hand on my shoulder for support. I supported my family, I said, trying not to raise my voice. 25 years paying for the house, the car, the groceries, clothes for everyone. Paid for your treatment, Barbara, when you had blood pressure and thyroid problems. Bought Cassie everything she needed for school. Helped her with the down payment on her car. So? Barbara shrugged with the look of someone explaining obvious things to a child. Those are your direct responsibilities as a husband and father. But preparing for the future, saving for emergencies, is also the responsibility of the head of the family. And you preferred to spend it all away. What did I spend it on? I felt my voice getting louder. Drinking? Women? Gambling? All sorts of unnecessary things, Barbara answered coldly. Expensive tools for his workshop in the basement, parts for a car that could have been sold a long time ago and bought something more economical, on gifts that no one particularly wanted. Lisa nodded, agreeing with her mother. It was a treacherous nod, a sign that they had discussed my shortcomings as a financial planner more than once. Remember last year when you spent $300 on a new welder? Lisa said, finally lifting her eyes and looking at me. And for my birthday, you gave me a $200 gold bracelet. Welding machine brings additional income from work in the workshop, I answered. And the bracelet? I thought you'd be happy. I wanted to do you a favor. It would be better to put this money on deposit, said Lisa in the tone of a bank consultant. Then now we would have savings with interest. I looked at my wife and realized that I was talking to a complete stranger, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 11 years, who'd given birth to me. No, we didn't have kids, just Cassie. The woman I'd worked tirelessly for was now accusing me of not preparing for my own terminal illness. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady and controlling every intonation. Let's say I didn't plan the family budget well, but this isn't about past mistakes, it's about the present. I need surgery to stay alive. Can't we find some way out of this? Barbara and Lisa looked at each other, and in that quick glance I read something that finally got to me. They had already discussed this situation among themselves. Not now, not after I'd told them about the diagnosis, but before. Maybe even before I'd come home with the test results. Maybe they were just waiting for official confirmation of what they already knew or suspected. Mike, Barbara began in the tone of a psychologist explaining something to a difficult patient, you have to understand our position. We can't risk the financial well-being of the whole family for the sake of one man. One person? I asked, not believing my own ears. I'm not just one man. I'm a husband and a father. I am the head of this family. You're a sick man with no savings, Barbara said harshly, each word hitting me like a hammer. And frankly, you're costing us a lot of money. The words sounded like a final judgment. Expensive. So I had become a burden on my own family, an expense to be optimized or eliminated from the budget. Cassie sobbed and walked quickly out of the kitchen. I heard her go up the stairs to her room, then the door slammed. The one person in this house who was genuinely worried about me couldn't take such cruelty. Mom, maybe you shouldn't be so blunt, Lisa said quietly, but there was no condemnation of her mother's remarks in her words, rather regret that the truth had to be voiced so harshly. How else should it be? Barbara stood up and started pacing around the kitchen, waving her arms. Hypocrisy? Pretend everything is fine and we'll just find the money in the tree? Lisa, you work in a bank. You understand credit loads and family obligations better than anyone. Lisa nodded with the look of an expert. If we take out a $10,000 consumer loan, our monthly payments will increase by at least $300 to $400. What if Mike can't work after the surgery? What if there are complications and lengthy rehab? Who's going to pay the loan? I'll work, I repeated stubbornly. The doctor says that 3 months after a successful operation, you can return to normal activities. If everything goes well, Barbara emphasized, and if it doesn't, what if you become an invalid? Then we'll have a sick husband to support plus loan debts. Who will feed the family? Lisa was silent, but I could see from her face that she agreed with her mother. My own wife saw me as a potential burden, which is better to get rid of now, before the situation did not worsen even more. So you're suggesting that I die? I asked bluntly. Don't dramatize the situation, Barbara grimaced. No one is suggesting that you die. We're just saying that we can't afford the expense at the moment. But without the surgery, I'll die. The doctor said clearly that the next heart attack would be fatal. Doctors say a lot of things, Barbara shrugged. They're not God. They're wrong in their prognoses too. You may live many more years without any surgery. You just have to be more attentive to your health, diet. Don't overexert yourself. I realized that the conversation had reached a complete dead end. Barbara and Lisa had already made their final decision, and no amount of arguments or death threats would change their minds. For them, I had become an economic problem that had to be solved with minimal expense. Fine, I said, slowly rising from the table. I understand your position very clearly. I will look for money on my own. And where will you find it? Barbara asked mockingly. Would you rob a bank? Win the lottery? I don't know yet, but I'll find them. I took the medical documents and headed for the stairs. I could hear Lisa and Barbara discussing my situation behind me, but I couldn't make out the words. My ears were buzzing with a mixture of anger, despair, and bitter disappointment in the people I thought were closest to me. The next few days became a nightmare. I lay in bed and thought about every possible way to get $10,000 in a month. I lost all sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my head was spinning with numbers, interest on loans, amounts in the bank accounts of acquaintances. Wednesday morning, I got up at 5 in the morning and made a detailed list of all the people I could theoretically turn to for help. Work colleagues, old friends, distant relatives, neighbors, everyone who knew me well enough to have money to spare. The list was frustratingly short. At breakfast, I tried to talk to Lisa again. Maybe we should go to your relatives, I suggested, spreading butter on my toast. Aunt Patricia seems to be doing well at the beauty parlor. Lisa didn't even look up from her coffee. Sure, Aunt Patricia had just taken out a loan to expand her business. She's got every dollar in the bank right now. What about Uncle Ronald? I mean, he's a handyman at an auto repair shop, so he must be saving something. Ronald's saving for retirement. He's 59 years old now. He won't risk his savings. Barbara sat across from us, slowly eating her oatmeal and listening to our conversation with the expression of someone watching a meaningless play. Mike, she said, setting aside her spoon, you realize that no one would lend you that much money, right? $10,000 is not $200 to fix a car. People don't throw that kind of money around. But if you explain the situation, explain what? Barbara interrupted me. That you're sick and need an expensive operation? And if you die during the operation, who would pay your debts then? Lisa? Did she sign up for your commitment? Lisa was silent, but her silence was more eloquent than any words. She was clearly not going to take responsibility for my debts in case of failure. After breakfast, I drove to work with a heavy heart. My co-workers noticed that I didn't look well, but I didn't bother to give details. Only to Steve Martinez, who drove me to the hospital, did I explain the situation. Shit, Mike, he shook his head. 15 grand is serious. I've got a couple thousand in my account at best. I'm not asking you for money, I hastened to reassure him. I'm just thinking out loud about what to do. What about your wife? She works in a bank. She should know where to get a loan on acceptable terms. I didn't say anything. It was too humiliating to tell Steve about my family's reaction. All day I worked on automatic, thinking about my problems. By lunchtime, I had made a decision. I would try to contact old friends. Jeff Collins, with whom we had been friends since high school, seemed to be doing well in the construction business. Maybe he could help or at least give advice. I called Jeff that evening. I hadn't talked to him in 8 months, but he was happy to hear from me. Mike, what's up? What's up? What's going on with your family? Jeff, I'm in trouble, I said bluntly. Serious health problems. I told him about the diagnosis and the necessary surgery. Jeff listened carefully, asked a few questions about the doctors and the hospital. I see, he finally said. How much money do you need? 10,000. The insurance only covers part of it. There was a pause. I could hear Jeff breathing heavily into the phone. Mike, I'd love to help, but I'm going through a rough patch right now. 3 facilities at once, a bunch of loans, working capital tied up. The most I can offer is $1,000, and that's for a couple months. Thanks, Jeff. I understand. Why don't you try a bank for a consumer loan? Or credit unions, where the interest rates are lower? After talking to Jeff, I called 3 other old acquaintances. The response was about the same: sympathy, regret, and a maximum of $500 to $1,000 in debt. By the end of the evening, it became clear that it was impossible to raise the necessary amount through acquaintances. At home, I found Lisa and Barbara watching some TV series in the living room. Cassie sat at the kitchen table with textbooks, preparing for an exam on pharmacology. How's it going with finding the money? Barbara asked, keeping her eyes on the screen. No luck so far, I answered. Tomorrow I'll go to the bank and talk about a loan. What bank? Lisa finally looked at me. Ours. I can find out the terms of credit. Yeah, that'd be good. Mike, Lisa said in the tone of a bank consultant, with your income and credit history, the maximum you can count on is $7,000 or $8,000, and that's at a high interest rate. And if you vouch for me? Lisa and Barbara looked at each other. I won't vouch for you, Lisa said firmly. It's too much of a risk. Risk? I couldn't believe my ears. I'm your husband. That's exactly why I don't want to take any risks, Lisa replied. If something happens to you, I'll be left with your debts, and I have obligations to my mother, to Cassie. Barbara nodded approvingly. Lisa is being sensible. A woman has to think about her future, especially under these circumstances. What other circumstances? I asked. Under circumstances where her husband could leave her a widow with a lot of problems at any moment, Barbara said stiffly. Cassie looked up from her textbooks. How can you say that? She asked quietly. Daddy's sick. He needs help. Cassie, you're still young, Barbara said condescendingly. You don't understand how life works. Everyone has to take responsibility for their actions and decisions. What actions? Sorry, Cassie said indignantly. Daddy got sick through no fault of his own. But he hadn't saved for a rainy day in 25 years, Barbara countered. He'd spent it all on unnecessary things instead of thinking about the future. I could feel my insides boiling with uncontrollable anger. These women had turned my illness into a lesson in financial literacy. Okay, I said as calmly as I could. I won't ask you for anything. I'll do it myself. And how would you do that? Barbara asked mockingly. Sell the car. I'll take out a maxed out loan. Borrow from everyone I know. Get a second job. What second job? Lisa snorted. Did you forget you have a heart condition? What employer would hire a man who could become ill at any moment? I'll find something. Mike, be realistic, Barbara sighed. Hey, worry, you can't make $10,000 in a month. It's unrealistic with your abilities. The next few days were a nightmare. I went to banks, credit unions, pawn shops. Everywhere one answer. At my income and without a guarantor, maximum $6,000 to $7,000 at high interest. The car was valued at $5,000, less than I expected. From the workshop in the basement, I could get $1,000 for all the equipment. At home, the atmosphere was getting tense. Lisa and Barbara pretended that nothing much was going on. They discussed plans for the weekend, watched the news, cooked dinner. It was as if there wasn't a dying man in the house who was desperately trying to save his life. Worst of all was their ostensible indifference. Barbara could ask at breakfast, "Did you find the money?" in the same tone as someone asking about the weather. Lisa stopped talking about it altogether, as if my health problems didn't concern her at all. Cassie was the only one who kept me going. She brought me articles about new methods of treating heart disease, advised me of clinics where surgery could be cheaper. "Daddy, what about medical tourism?" she asked me one night. "In Mexico, they do these surgeries for half the cost." "Too risky," I replied. "If something goes wrong, they can only bring me home in a coffin." A week after the diagnosis, I realized I was running out of time and money. $6,000 from the sale of the car, $3,000 loan on the security of home appliances, another $1,000 from the sale of tools. I was $5,000 short of the necessary $15,000. Friday evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, once again calculating the meager possibilities. Lisa was washing dishes, Barbara was watching TV, Cassie was studying anatomy. "Maybe we should apply to charities," and Cassie suggested. "There are organizations that help with medical expenses." "It takes months to process an application," I replied. "And I don't have the time." Barbara grinned, keeping her eyes on the TV show. "Maybe it's time to accept reality," she said. "Not all problems can be solved with money." "This one does," I said firmly. "Not to the best of our ability." Barbara finally turned to me. "Mike, you're living in an illusion. It's time to come down to earth." Lisa finished washing the dishes and sat down across from me. "Mom's right," she said quietly. "We did the best we could. You've tried banks, friends, sold the car. There's nothing else left. It remains to find another $5,000. "Where?" Lisa waved her hands. "Mike, be reasonable. We can't pull off a miracle." I looked at these two women and realized they had already accepted my death. In fact, they saw it as the logical outcome of the situation I had created with my financial irresponsibility. "I see," I said, getting up from the table. "Then I'll do it myself." "And what will you do?" Barbara asked. "I'll find a way, anyway." As I went up to the bedroom, I could hear them resuming their discussion of tomorrow's plans. Lisa was going to a friend's birthday party. Barbara was planning a trip to the garden center for flowers. Normal life went on as if nothing was happening. That night I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what it meant to live in a family where your life wasn't worth $15,000, where your wife and mother-in-law have already signed your death warrant and are quietly planning a future without you. On Sunday night, when I had pretty much resigned myself to the idea of the inevitable outcome, Cassie knocked quietly on my bedroom door. It was about 11:30. Lisa was watching a movie downstairs. Barbara was already asleep. I was lying on the bed with my medical files, once again rereading Dr. Anderson's report and trying to find some hope in the dry medical wording. "Daddy, can I come in?" Cassie whispered. "Of course, come in." She entered, holding a large white envelope, and quietly closed the door behind her. She had the same serious expression on her face that I'd seen on the day of her parents' funeral. Focused, determined, but with a barely perceptible tremor in her lips. "What's wrong, sunshine?" I asked, setting the papers aside. Cassie walked over to the bed and sat on the edge, placing the envelope on the nightstand. I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "Daddy, I found the money for your surgery," she said quietly but clearly. I sat up on the bed, not sure what she was talking about. "What money, Cassie? What are you talking about?" She picked up an envelope and held it out to me. The envelope was heavy, thick. "Open it," she said. I opened the envelope and was stunned. Inside were neatly folded bills, hundreds and fifties, tied with bank rubber bands. Lots of bills. Lots of bills. "Cassie, what is this? Where did you get that kind of money?" $15,000, she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Enough for the whole operation." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was holding in my hands the salvation I'd been desperately seeking for the past 2 weeks. "But where did—" "Cassie, explain it to me, please." She took a deep breath. "I sold the car. Drove it to the dealer this morning. Got $9,000. I had another $4,000 in my savings account from 3 years of work, and $2,000 I got from selling all my jewelry, watch, tablet, and other stuff. I stared at her and couldn't say a word. This 24-year-old girl had given everything she had, absolutely everything, to save my life. Cassie, I can't accept this, I said finally. It's your life savings. You've been saving that money for 3 years. Daddy, she took my hand, you can make money again, and I only have one for you. Tears came to my eyes. In all my life, I have never received a more expensive gift. Sebron Menemerin, but how will you get to work without a car? I'll take the bus, or I'll rent one for a while. Dad, don't think about that now. It's your health that matters. And the apartment? You've been saving for a place of your own. The apartment can wait. I'm young, I can save again. And you? She didn't finish, but I understood. I may not have time to wait. I hugged her tightly, feeling tears running down my cheeks. In a house where my own wife and mother-in-law thought my life was too precious, my adopted daughter didn't hesitate to sacrifice all her possessions. Thank you, I whispered in her ear. Thank you, my dear girl. Call the surgeon tomorrow and make an appointment for surgery, Cassie said, pulling away and wiping away her tears. The sooner the better. I will, first thing in the morning. And don't tell anyone it's my money, she asked. Let them think you found some other way. Why? Cassie paused, searching for words. I don't want to be lectured about how unwise I've been. I don't want their advice and criticism. I realized who she was talking about. Lisa and Barbara could really start reprimanding her for being irresponsible and impractical. Okay, but sooner or later, they're going to find out. You don't have a car anymore. I'll tell them I sold it because I've decided to go on a spending spree for a while. That's pretty reasonable for a girl my age. We talked some more, going over the details of the surgery and recovery. Cassie, as a nurse, knew a lot of nuances about surgical preparation and post-operative care. Go to bed, Daddy, she said as she stood up. You have a big day tomorrow. Cassie, I stopped her at the door. I'll never forget this, and I'll make sure I get every dollar back. I don't need anything back, she smiled. You've been giving me a lot more than money for 20 years now. After she left, I sat on the bed for a long time, holding the envelope of money. $15,000. My life, bought by the self-sacrifice of a girl who wasn't even my blood daughter. I woke up in the morning with a firm decision. The first thing I did was call the cardiac center and made an appointment with Dr. Connolly for Tuesday. The receptionist warned me that a $5,000 deposit would be required to reserve a spot on the surgery schedule. No problem, I replied. I have the money. Over breakfast, I broke the news to the family. So, I've solved the money issue, I said, spreading jam on my toast. On Tuesday, I go to the surgeon, most likely. The operation will be scheduled for next week. Lisa looked up from her coffee. Barbara stopped reading the morning paper. Cassie continued to eat her oatmeal, not giving any indication that she knew what it was about. Solve the question? Barbara asked. In what way? I found a way to get the missing money. What way? Insisted the mother-in-law. That's not important. The important thing is that the operation will take place. Lisa frowned. Mike, you didn't take out a loan against the house? Please tell me you didn't do something so stupid. No, there's nothing wrong with the house. Then where did the money come from? Barbara put the newspaper aside and looked at me carefully. Mike, we have a right to know. If you're involved in any shady schemes, I didn't get involved in any schemes. I just found the money. Where did you find it? Lisa used an investigator's tone. On the road? Did you win the lottery? I looked at Cassie. She shook her head faintly, asking me not to give her away. Sold some of my valuables, I lied, and I borrowed from a distant acquaintance. What friend? Barbara persisted. Who lends $15,000? That's none of your business, I said sharply. Barbara and Lisa looked at each other. I could see that they didn't believe a word I said. Mike, Lisa said slowly, I hope you realize the consequences of your actions. If you took money from some shady people, I took money from perfectly decent people, I interrupted her. And that's the last time I'm discussing this matter with you. The rest of the breakfast passed in tense silence. Lisa and Barbara obviously suspected something, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Cassie acted quite naturally, as if she knew nothing about the origin of the money. On Tuesday, I went to see Dr. Conley. The surgeon was a man of about 45, short, with attentive gray eyes and confident movements. He scrutinized my tests, looked at the scans, and asked a lot of questions about my well-being. The situation is really serious, he finally said, but it is quite operable. With the modern level of cardiac surgery, the success rate is about 92%. And the other 8%? I asked. Complications. But in your case, the risks are minimal. You're relatively young, you don't have diabetes, your liver and kidneys are normal. The doctor scheduled the surgery for Thursday of next week. I made an advance payment, received a list of recommendations for preparation, and went home feeling like life was making sense again. At home, I found a strange scene. Lisa and Barbara were sitting in the kitchen with serious faces, talking quietly about something. When they saw me, they stopped talking. "How was the consultation?" Lisa asked. "Good. The operation is scheduled for Thursday." "I see." Barbara got up and came over to me. "Mike, we need to talk." "About what?" "About the money. We found out where you got it. I got a heart attack." "What did you find out?" Lisa stood up too. "Cassie sold the car," she said in an accusing tone, "and she withdrew all the money from the account. We checked." "Checked how?" "I know people at the car dealership," Barbara said, "and at the bank where Cassie had her account. It wasn't hard to find out." I knew the mystery was solved, but I was surprised by the women's reactions. Instead of gratitude, their faces showed anger. "So what?" I asked. "She's a grown woman. She has the right to manage her money." "She's an idiot," Barbara exploded. "A stupid, irresponsible girl who doesn't understand the value of money. How dare you talk about her like that?" I was outraged. "She saved my life. She threw away all her savings." Lisa was no less indignant. $15,000. "Do you realize how much that is for a girl her age?" "I do. And that's why I'm grateful to her." "Grateful?" Barbara shook her hands. "Mike, you got that kid into your problems. You made her sacrifice her future for your ambitions." "What ambition? I just want to stay alive." "At the expense of other people's money." Lisa pointed her finger at me. "You took advantage of the fact that this girl loves you." At that moment, Cassie walked into the kitchen. She had come home from work and looked tired. "What's going on here, Marn?" she asked, seeing our worried faces. "What's going on is that you did something stupid," Barbara said sharply. "You spent all your money on an operation that you might not need." "What do you mean it won't be necessary?" Cassie turned pale. "What if Mike lives another 10 years without any surgery?" Lisa spoke in an angry, hissing voice. "What then? You wasted $15,000. "I saved Dad's life," Cassie replied quietly. "You ruined yourself because he couldn't save money for 25 years of work." Barbara stepped close to Cassie. "You stupid girl, you don't even realize you've been used." "No one used me." Cassie straightened up and looked at Barbara point blank. "I made that decision on my own." "Because he was pushing your pity." "Iram," Lisa pointed at me, "walking around the house sour-faced, oohing and eyeing until you decided to save him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These women blamed Cassie for showing humanity. "Lisa, you're crazy," I shouted. "She did the honorable thing. She acted like a fool." Barbara snapped at me. "And you took advantage of it." Cassie stood in the middle of the kitchen, and I could see her hands trembling with indignation. "You're both crazy," she said quietly but clearly. "Are you mad at me for saving a man's life? We're mad at you for ruining yourself because of his irresponsibility." Barbara was pointing her finger in my direction. "Cassie, you're a smart girl. How could you do that? How could I let Daddy die?" Cassie raised her voice. "Ma. How could I stand by and watch you refuse to help him?" Lisa and Barbara looked at each other. "We didn't refuse," Lisa said in a false tone. "We explained that we couldn't afford the expense." "You sentenced him to death." Cassie couldn't hold back any longer. "You decided his life wasn't worth $15,000. Is your future worth it?" Barbara parried. "My future without Daddy doesn't make sense." There was silence in the kitchen. Lisa and Barbara looked at Cassie as if she had said something sacrilegious. "Cassie," Barbara said slowly, "you have to understand. We've been thinking about you, about your future, about your interests, and you've ruined it." Ruined what? Your life. For a man who isn't even your own father. The words sounded like a slap in the face. Cassie flinched as if she'd been slapped. He's more my family than you are, she said in a shaky voice. We're your family, Lisa said indignantly. Family is the people who support you in times of need, Cassie replied. Not those who think money is worth more than the life of a loved one. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the door of her room slam. Lisa and Barbara were left standing in the middle of the kitchen with guilty faces. Mike, Lisa finally said, give her the money back. This is crazy. I won't, I replied firmly. The operation is going ahead. Then you're even more irresponsible than I thought, Barbara hissed. Maybe, but I'll be alive, and that's all that matters. I went upstairs to Cassie to thank her again and to cheer her up after that disgusting scene. The women stayed in the kitchen to discuss my irresponsibility and Cassie's stupidity. That night, I finally realized I was living in a house with strangers. After that awful scene in the kitchen, I went up to Cassie's house. Knocking on the door, I heard a quiet, "Come in." She was sitting on the bed, hugging her knees, looking out the window at evening Milwaukee. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. She must have cried them all in the first few minutes. "What's up, sunshine?" I asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "I'm fine," she said, not turning her head. "Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "About what it means to be a family. I used to think I understood. Turns out I don't." I took her hand. "Cassie, don't pay attention to what they said. They said a lot of stupid things in a fit of anger." "Daddy," she finally looked at me, "be honest. Do you think what I did was wrong?" "I think what you did was the right thing to do, and I'm more proud of you than you can imagine." "What if the surgery doesn't go well? If—" She didn't finish, but I understood. "Then you'll know you did everything you could, and I'll know that I'm dying surrounded by the love of at least one loved one." We talked for another half hour. Cassie told me how hard it had been to sell the car. She'd grown very attached to it, how she'd had to haggle at the pawn shop for her jewelry, how she spent the whole day wondering if she was doing the right thing. But when I brought you the envelope," she said, "I saw your face, and I knew I had done the right thing." The next day, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Lisa and Barbara pretended that nothing had happened, but I could see their meaningful glances and whispers in the corners. Cassie was being emphatically polite but cold. At breakfast, she answered Barbara with "yes, ma'am" and "no, ma'am," as if she were talking to a stranger. Meanwhile, I was preparing for surgery. I took the additional tests that Dr. Connolly required, bought the necessary medications for the post-operative period. Strangely, the closer I got to the surgery date, the calmer I felt. Maybe it was because I was finally doing something concrete to save my life. On Wednesday night, the day before surgery, I was sitting at the kitchen table filling out paperwork for the hospital. Lisa was upstairs taking a shower before bed. Barbara was watching TV in the living room. Cassie was working the night shift and wasn't due back until morning. I had to find the insurance policy so I could rewrite the number. I knew Lisa kept all the paperwork in her folder on the kitchen table. I opened the folder and started going through the papers. Utility bills, receipts, tax documents. At the very bottom of the folder was a bank statement. I picked it up to see if the insurance was there, and I ran my eyes over the lines. It was Lisa's current account statement for the last 3 months. What I saw made me freeze in place. Every month on the 20th, an $800 wire transfer left Lisa's account. The recipient was Daniel Harrison, a name that told me nothing. I scrutinized the statement. 3 months in a row, exactly on the 20th day, $800 to Daniel Harrison. That's $2,400. 3 months. My heart was beating faster. $800 a month is more than half of Lisa's salary after taxes. Who is Daniel Harrison? And why does my wife regularly wire him such large sums of money? I turned the page. The transfers to Harrison weren't just from the last 3 months. They stretched further back in time. 4 months ago, 5, 6. Everywhere the same amount, the same name. Quickly calculating, I realized. For 6 months, Lisa transferred to this Harrison almost $5,000. And if we take into account that the transfers clearly began earlier, a terrible thought flashed through my mind. I took a calculator and started counting. If the transfers have been going on for a year, it's almost $10,000. If it's been a year and a half, that's $15,000. $15,000. Exactly what my surgery had cost. My hands trembled. I reread the lines of the statement over and over again, hoping I'd made a mistake, that I'd imagined it. But the numbers were clear, merciless. My wife, who 2 weeks ago had said we had no money for my surgery, was regularly transferring large sums to some Daniel Harrison. The woman who refused to vouch for my loan because too much risk was quietly spending hundreds of dollars every month for obscure purposes. Daniel Harrison. Who's that? The creditor? But then why are the transfers so regular? Like a paycheck? Business partner? Lisa doesn't own a business. A relative. I didn't know anyone with that last name in her family. There was only one option left, which I didn't want to consider, but which explained everything. A lover. Lisa keeps a lover on my money and the family's money. That's why she became distant. That's why she didn't want to spend on my surgery. The money had already been allocated for other purposes. I sat at my desk holding the statement in my hands and felt my whole world crumbling. Not from the fact that my wife was cheating. That was painful, but I could get over it. It was the fact that she was willing to let me die while continuing to spend the family money on her lover. $800 a month. Almost $10,000 a year. And there were other things she spent, like restaurants, gifts, trips. How much did she spend on this Harrison guy? I remembered our conversation 2 weeks ago. We can't afford that kind of spending. Where do you get that kind of money? We have to be realistic. In the meantime, there was money in her account that she had faithfully wired to her lover every month. Worst of all was the realization that Barbara must have known. Mother and daughter were too close for such things to remain a secret. So both women were sitting at this table, looking me in the eye and lying about not having any money, knowing that Lisa was spending thousands of dollars on a lover. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lisa was coming down after her shower. I quickly shoved the statement back into the folder and pretended to study the insurance documents. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Lisa asked, entering the kitchen in her bathrobe. "Yes, here's the policy," I replied, trying to keep my voice normal. She stepped closer, and I could smell her shampoo, an expensive one she bought at a specialty salon for $40 a bottle. I wondered if Daniel Harrison liked that smell. "Are you nervous about the surgery?" she asked, massaging my shoulders. "A little. You're going to be fine." "Doctor, Connolly is an excellent specialist." I looked at her neatly manicured hands, at the wedding ring she still wore, and thought, how long has she been lying to my face? A month? 6 months? A year? "Lisa," I said without turning my head, "do you have any major expenses that I don't know about?" Her hands froze on my shoulders. "What kind of expenses?" "Well, I don't know. Loans, debts, some kind of regular payments?" "No," she answered after a pause. "Just the usual stuff, groceries, clothes, cosmetics." Lies, a direct, cynical lie. "Are cosmetics expensive?" "Not particularly, within reason. $800 a month is her reasonable limits for cosmetics." "Okay," I said. "I just wondered what the money was being spent on." "For a living," Lisa replied simply. "For a normal life." She kissed me on the top of my head and went upstairs. I remained sitting at the table, pondering the discovery. So this is how it really was. While I'd spent 2 weeks agonizing over the money for the operation, groveling at banks, borrowing from acquaintances, selling my car, my wife had been quietly transferring $800 a month to her lover. While Cassie was selling all her property to save my life, Lisa was planning another transfer to Daniel Harrison. Most importantly, the family had the money for my surgery. Not all $15,000, but half of it. If Lisa had stopped supporting her lover, if she'd really wanted to help me, we could have found a way out. But she didn't. She'd rather let me die than deprive her Daniel of money. I tried to imagine this man. Probably younger than me. Women rarely keep lovers older than themselves. Handsome, charming, able to say the right words. Probably unemployed or on a low income, in need of financial support. Where do they meet? Hotels? At his house? Or maybe he comes over when I'm not here, sleeps in our bed, eats at our table, uses my things. The anger grew gradually like a tide. Not so much because of the infidelity, after all. I suspected that our marriage had long been at the seams. more because of the cynicism with which Lisa was willing to let me die for the comfort of her lover. I remembered Barbara's words, "You're costing us dearly." Now that phrase took on a new meaning. I was preventing Lisa from spending more money on Daniel Harrison. My illness was threatening their relationship because surgery would require the money she regularly wired to him. No wonder she and her mother reacted so violently to Cassie's act. The girl had ruined their plans. Instead of letting me die quietly, she saved me and showed me that money can be found if you have the desire. And Lisa didn't have the will. There was a desire to get rid of her sick husband and continue a happy life with her lover, with money that now didn't have to be spent on the family. I tried to remember when Lisa's estrangement began. 8 or 9 months ago, she started talking to me less, spending more time on the computer, staying late at work more often. About the same time, she started going to the beautician, changing her closet, talking about looking after herself. It all fit. Lisa had a lover about a year ago and since then lived a double life. And when my surgery came up, she chose her lover. I wonder if Daniel Harrison knows he's being kept alive by his dying husband. Or did Lisa tell him she was divorced? That the money is her personal savings? Well, it doesn't matter. What's important is that I'm having surgery tomorrow. And today I found out that my wife chose to let me die for the sake of her lover. I closed the file and went upstairs. In the bedroom, Lisa was already lying in bed, reading some magazine. She looked calm, even happy. She was probably thinking that tomorrow, when I was lying on the operating table, she would be able to send Harrison another transfer. "Ready for tomorrow?" she asked, putting the magazine aside. "Quite ready," I answered, undressing. "And I'm worried," admitted Lisa. "After all, heart surgery, it's serious." Is she really worried? Or just play the role of a caring wife to the end? "Do not worry. I have every chance." "Sonny, of course you do," she smiled. "You're a strong man, a man she was ready to leave for dead a month ago." I lay down next to her and turned out the light. In the darkness, we lay in silence, each thinking about our own things. Lisa was probably planning her life after the operation, successful or unsuccessful. And I was thinking about the fact that in the morning, I would not only have surgery, but also a conversation with my wife about her transfers to Daniel Harrison. But first the surgery. First we have to survive, and then we'll deal with the betrayal. As I fell asleep, I thought about Cassie, who'd sold everything for my life, and Lisa, who'd chosen to spend the money on a lover. Two women living in the same house but belonging to different human species. Tomorrow I'll find out if I'm destined to survive this operation, and if I am, there will be another surgery to come, to remove from my life people who consider my death an acceptable price for their comfort. Strangely, the thought didn't scare me. On the contrary, I was relieved that things were finally falling into place. Now I knew exactly who was who in this house. The operation was a success. Dr. Connolly informed my family 4 hours after I was wheeled into the operating room. I woke up in the ICU the next day with tubes down my throat and wires connected to my chest, but alive. My heart was beating steady, blood flowing through the new pathways the surgeons had created. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was Cassie's face. She was sitting next to the bed in a white nurse's robe, apparently arranged with her coworkers for ICU duty. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her smile was happy. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "How are you feeling?" I tried to answer, but the tube in my throat only made me wheeze. Cassie understood and nodded. "Don't talk yet. Everything went fine. The doctor said my heart was working like new." 2 days later, I was moved to a regular room. Cassie came in every day after work, bringing fruit, telling me the news. Lisa and Barbara visited less often, once every 2 days, stayed for half an hour, talked mostly in general terms about the weather and hospital food. On the 4th day after surgery, when I could already speak normally and even walk a little in the hallway, I asked Cassie to bring some documents from home. "I need bank statements from last year," I said. "They're in a folder in the kitchen." "What do you need them for?" Cassie was surprised. "I want to get a handle on the family finances, see what we spend our money on." Cassie brought the files the next day. In the stack was the same statement with the transfers to Daniel Harrison, plus a few from earlier. I scrutinized all the papers. The picture became even clearer. The transfers to Harrison had begun 11 months ago. First $500, then the amounts rose to $800. During the entire period, Lisa had transferred more than $8,000 to him. In addition, The statements showed a lot of spending at restaurants and stores that I didn't remember. Expensive downtown restaurants, women's clothing boutiques, a jewelry salon. Lisa was spending money on dates with her lover and gifts, most likely to herself on his behalf. I also noticed an oddity in her spending schedule. Most of the restaurants and stores she visited on weekdays when I was at work. So Daniel doesn't work or works on a freelance schedule. Typical Alfonso living off a woman. The 7th day after surgery, I was discharged home. The doctor recommended a month of home rest, no exercise, regular checkups. Cassie took a week off to take care of me. I spent the first few days at home recovering and thinking about a plan to talk to Lisa. I had to pick the right moment when Barbara wouldn't be around, and I could calmly relay what I'd learned. The moment came 3 days later. Cassie was at work. Barbara had gone to the doctor for a routine checkup. Lisa was in the kitchen with her laptop, working from home. The bank allowed it a few days a week. "Lisa, I need to talk to you," I said, entering the kitchen. "About what?" She did not lift her head from the screen. "About money. About our family finances." "What exactly are you interested in?" I put the printouts of bank statements on the table. "That's what I'm interested in." Lisa looked at the papers, and I saw her expression change. First surprise, then understanding, then something akin to fear. "Where did you get my transcripts?" she asked. "It doesn't matter where. It matters what they say." She closed the laptop and picked up one of the statements. "And what's confusing you?" "Daniel Harrison, $800 every month, for almost a year now." Lisa was silent, scrutinizing the numbers as if she were seeing them for the first time. "So?" she said finally. "What do you mean, so what? Who is Daniel Harrison? And why are you transferring my money to him?" "Not your money, my money. I earn it. I have a right to spend it." "Spend it on what? On who?" Lisa stood up and walked to the window, turning away from me. "This is my personal business, Mike." "Your personal business?" I felt myself boiling. "When I needed money for surgery to stay alive, you told me there was no money. Meanwhile, you were wiring $800 a month to some guy." "That's different." "What's the difference? Explain it to me." Lisa turned to me. On her face was the expression of a man who was cornered. "Oh, Mike, I don't have to account to you for every expense. For $8,000 a year I do, especially when that money could have saved my life. It could have, but it didn't. You found another way. At Cassie's expense. She bankrupted herself because her own stepmother chose to spend the money on a lover." The word lover sounded like a slap in the face. Lisa flinched and took a step back. "How did you know it was a lover? Who else? A relative? A business partner? A charity?" "Lisa, I'm not an idiot. A woman does not transfer $800 a month to a strange man for nothing." She was silent, staring at the floor. "So who is Daniel Harrison?" I insisted. "A friend," she said quietly. "What friend? Where did you meet him?" "At the gym. He's a coach." "And what, trainers now charge $800 a month for classes?" Lisa raised her head and looked me in the eye. I could read determination in her gaze. She realized it was useless to deny it. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I'm in a relationship with another man. Yes, I help him financially. So what?" "So what?" I couldn't believe such cynicism. "You cheat on me and spend money on a lover that could have saved my life." "Ari Oam, that money wouldn't have saved your life. It wasn't enough. $8,000 plus our savings is more than half of what we needed. We would have found the rest." "That's not a fact." "So you chose not to risk your lover's financial well-being for your husband's health." Lisa sat back down at the table and folded her arms across her chest. "Mike, let's be honest. Our marriage hasn't been a marriage for a long time. We live like neighbors. Everyone has their own lives, their own interests. And your lovers?" "I do." "You might have one too, I haven't checked." "I don't have anyone. I was working, supporting a family. I thought we had a normal relationship." "Normal?" Lisa grinned. "Mike, when was the last time we had a normal conversation? When we made love? When we planned something together?" "We were planning a surgery." "Well, I was planning it, and you were sabotaging it." "I wasn't sabotaging. I was being realistic." "You were a traitor." Barbara came into the kitchen. She came back from the doctor's earlier than we expected. "What's going on here?" she asked, seeing our tense faces. "Why are you yelling? Your daughter's cheating on me," I said bluntly, "and spending the family money on a lover." Barbara looked at Lisa, then at me, then at the statements on the table. "So what of it?" she said calmly. "So what? It's cheating." "Mike," Barbara sat down at the table and looked at me sympathetically. "Do you seriously think Lisa should settle for a loveless marriage for the rest of her life? Without love? Of course. You and she have been living like brother and sister for years now. No intimacy, no common plans. Lisa's a young woman. She's entitled to happiness. On me? At her own expense," Barbara corrected. "She earns the money, she manages it. So you both think it's okay to cheat?" "We think it's okay to try to find happiness," Barbara replied. "Mike, be honest with yourself. Do you really want Lisa to live in an unhappy marriage for the rest of her life?" I looked at these two women and realized that they had long ago decided everything between themselves. Moreover, they considered me an obstacle to happiness. "All right," I said. "Let's say the marriage is a failure. But why were you willing to let me die? Why did not say honestly, 'We want a divorce'?" Lisa and Barbara looked at each other. "Because divorce is a division of property," Barbara said bluntly. "Alimony, litigation, lawyers. And if you die," she didn't finish. "If I die, Lisa gets everything without sharing it with anyone," I finished for her. "The house, the insurance, my pension. And she can live in peace with her lover." "Mike, don't demonize the situation," Lisa said. "We didn't plan your death, but we didn't prevent it. When it came to money for the operation, you chose your lover." "We chose reality," Barbara replied. $15,000 is a lot of money for a family with our income, but not huge to support a lover." "Daniel's not a lover," Lisa interjected. "He's my, partner. We're planning a future together. With my money, money I earned." In a marriage that was registered with me, the conversation had reached an impasse. The women didn't consider themselves guilty. On the contrary, they made it sound as if I was interfering with Lisa's happiness and should be sympathetic to her need for another man. "And how long has this been going on?" I asked. "What exactly?" Lisa clarified. "Your affair with this Daniel? Almost a year. And what are your plans for the future?" Lisa was silent, choosing words. "We want to live together, officially." "You mean divorce me?" "Yes." "And when were you planning to tell me about it?" Another pause. "After you recovered," Lisa said. "We didn't want to add additional stress during your illness." How thoughtful. "What if I died during the surgery?" "Then the problem would have solved itself," Barbara answered honestly. This frankness struck me the most. They really did see my death as a convenient scenario. "I see," I said, getting up from the table. "It's all clear to me now." "Mike, don't make a tragedy out of it," Lisa asked. "We can divorce civilized without scandal." "Civilized? After you cheated on me for a year and was ready to let me die for a lover?" "We didn't plan your death, but we didn't prevent it, and it's almost the same thing." I took the bank statements and went to the stairs. "Where are you going to live with this Daniel?" I asked at the door. "We haven't decided yet," Lisa replied. "Decide quickly. Because there's no place for you in this house anymore." "Mike, be reasonable," Barbara intervened. "The house is deeded to the two of you. Lisa has equal rights." "We'll see what the court says," I said, "especially when they find out about the lover and the embezzlement." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear the women continuing their discussion downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. 3 days after our conversation, I called attorney Robert Stimson, an elderly man with 30 years of family law experience who had once helped me with the deeds to my house. He came to my home, since I was still complying with hospital regulations. "So, Mike," he said, settling into a chair across from the couch where I was lying, "on the phone you talked about a divorce with complicating circumstances." I handed him a folder of bank statements I'd managed to copy. "My wife is cheating on me and spending the family money on a lover, over $8,000 a year, and when I needed money for heart surgery, she refused to help me." Stimson scrutinized the documents, occasionally making notes in his notebook. The sums are really substantial. These transfers to Daniel Harrison are as regular as a paycheck. Did the wife admit to the extramarital affair? Yes, she hasn't denied it. Good. Cell phone ringing. In Wisconsin, adultery affects property division, especially if there's evidence of waste. You can seek reimbursement for the money spent, plus a larger share of the jointly acquired assets. What about the daughter? She's adopted, but I want to retain custody. How old is she? 24. Technically, we don't need custody, but she lives with us. I want her to stay with me. If she's of legal age, she can decide for herself, but considering she's not blood related to my wife, there shouldn't be a problem. Stimson explained to me the intricacies of divorce proceedings. In our case, it was relatively simple. The adultery was documented, the embezzlement of family funds too. The only assets are the house, the wife's car, and savings in joint accounts. Will you file a petition or waiting for the wife to file? Counselor asked. I'll file first. Today, if that's okay. That's fine. It's even better because you'll be the plaintiff, not the defendant. After Stimson left, I talked to Cassie. She came home from work tired, but she was in a good mood because the hospital was doing well and the patients were recovering. Cassie, there's something I need to tell you, I said when we were alone in the living room. What's wrong, Dad? You look serious. I'm divorcing Lisa. Cassie didn't look surprised. Because she refused to help with the surgery? Not only that, she has a lover for almost a year now, and she was spending the family money on him when I was dying of heart failure. That's what I thought, Cassie said quietly. She'd been acting strange the last few months. She often didn't sleep at home, was always on her cell phone, buying new clothes. You didn't say anything. Didn't want to upset you without proof. And then the surgery thing started to happen, and then it just didn't happen. Cassie, I'm going to ask you straight up, who are you going to stay with after the divorce? The house will probably have to be sold and the money split. She didn't even think about it. You, of course. Dad, you know how much you mean to me. What if Lisa wants you to stay with her? Lisa was never really interested in me. To her, I was more of a burden than a daughter. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Lisa and Barbara knew I was planning something, but they didn't know what it was. They were whispering in corners, silent when I appeared, making their own plans. Cassie kept her tone emphatically neutral, but I could see she'd already made her choice. She talked to Lisa and Barbara only when necessary, and with me she discussed future plans. A week later, Stimson filed for divorce. That same day, the bailiff served Lisa with a summons demanding division of property and compensation for wasted funds. That evening, we had one last marital scandal at home. You filed for divorce? Lisa came at me from the door, waving the papers at me. Without warning? And you cheated on me without warning, I calmly replied. Mike, we agreed to resolve everything peacefully. Peacefully? You think it's peaceful to spend family money on a lover while your husband is dying of heart failure? Barbara walked into the living room, her face red with indignation. You're demanding $8,000 in compensation, she shouted. Where did we get that kind of money? I don't know. Why don't you borrow it from Daniel Harrison? I sneered. Mike, be reasonable. Lisa tried to adopt a conciliatory tone. Why do we have to sue? Let's part ways. Good would be not to cheat on her husband and do not spend his money on a lover. It's my money. No, it's ours. Married money is joint property, and you squandered it. Cassie sat on the couch listening to our conversation, not interfering. But when Barbara started yelling at me, she stood up. Second, that's enough, she said firmly. Barbara, you have no right to yell at Daddy. I have the right to speak my mind in this house. You are a guest in this house, and you must behave accordingly. Barbara was taken aback by this insolence. She was used to Cassie always being quiet and not arguing. How dare you speak to me like that? The same way you dare to wish Daddy dead. We didn't wish anyone dead. You refused to help him with the money for the surgery knowing he might die. That's the same thing. Lisa tried to appeal to Cassie. Cassie, we're family. Are you really going to choose his side against us? I'm choosing to side with the man who's taken care of me for 20 years. Not someone who thinks money is worth more than life. He's not your real father. He's a real father. Unlike you, you're not real family. After that conversation, Lisa and Barbara practically boycotted Cassie and me. They talked only to each other, ignored us at dinner, planned their own affairs without considering our opinions. I was fine with that. I was recovering from surgery, preparing for trial, planning a new life. The trial lasted 3 months. Lisa hired a lawyer who tried to prove that the transfers to Harrison were personal loans and investments in a fitness project. But the bank statements spoke for themselves. Too regular amounts, too long a period, no loan documents. Besides, the private investigator Stimson hired easily found Daniel Harrison. It turned out that he was a 28-year-old fitness instructor who rented an expensive apartment in the city center and drove a BMW clearly beyond his means. At the same time, he was officially working only 3 days a week at a sports club for minimum wage. In court, Harrison was forced to admit that Lisa helped him financially and that they have a close relationship. This finally buried Lisa's hopes for an amicable resolution to the case. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern face, heard all the evidence and ruled in my favor. For 11 months, the defendant systematically squandered the family's money to support her lover, she said. In doing so, she denied her husband financial assistance for vital medical treatment. These actions are an abuse of family finances and grounds for an unequal division of property. The house was sold. I received 60% of the amount. Lisa paid me $8,000 in compensation for the squandered funds. I had to take out a loan because she had no money to spare. The car went to me, since it was bought mostly with my money. Cassie officially announced that she was staying with me, although no one really argued. 6 months after the divorce, Cassie and I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a nice neighborhood near the hospital where she worked. The money from the sale of the house and the compensation allowed us to live modestly but decently. Cassie got a job in the cardiology department. She said she wanted to help people with heart problems. I went back to work as an electrician, but on lighter jobs without climbing ladders or heavy loads. We became a real family, small but friendly. Cassie cooked dinners after work. I helped her with career planning. On weekends, we'd go out of town to the movies and sometimes visit my old friends. She started saving money for her own apartment again, but she was in no hurry. She said she wanted to be sure that I was fine. My heart was working normally. My health would not fail. "Daddy," she said at dinner one night, "don't you regret getting divorced?" "Not a second," I answered honestly. "I only wish I'd done it sooner." "And I regret spending all the money on your surgery," she said with a sad smile. "Why?" "Arun, because now I don't have the money to help you with a better apartment." I hugged her. "Sweetheart, you've already given me the most precious thing, life. The rest doesn't matter." We tried not to talk about Lisa and Barbara, but sometimes we got news. Lisa continued to meet with Harrison, but she couldn't pay him anymore. Alimony and credit ate up most of her salary. Barbara moved in with her sister in another city as it became unaffordable to rent a place in Milwaukee. Harrison, having lost his financial support, quickly grew cold to Lisa and found another sponsor, a middle-aged divorced woman with her own business. Lisa tried to get him back, even taking out new loans, but without success. A year after the divorce, I accidentally met her at the supermarket. She looked bad, aged, tired, in cheap clothes. We said hello politely, talked about the weather. "How are you?" I asked. "Fine," she said. But her eyes told me she wasn't fine. "And how's Daniel?" Lisa was silent for a moment. "We broke up," she said quietly. "I see." "Mike," she looked at me almost pleadingly. "Maybe we could, get together sometime? Talk?" "Talk about what?" "About us. About the good things between us." I shook my head. "Lisa, there's nothing more between us. And there won't be. But we've been together 11 years. Yes. And you chose a lover over your husband when he was dying. Some things can't be forgiven." She lowered her eyes and said nothing more. We went our separate ways, and that was the last time we saw each other. It has now been 2 years since the divorce. My heart is working fine. The doctors say the surgery went perfectly. Cassie has grown into a wonderful woman and a great nurse. She is appreciated at the hospital. She recently met a nice guy, a young doctor in the cardiology department. Sometimes I think about what happened and realize the disease turned out to be a blessing. It showed the true colors of the people I lived with. Without it, I could have spent years in a fake marriage, not knowing that my wife cheats and considers me a burden. Most importantly, I realized that a true family is not defined by bloodlines or a passport stamp, but by the willingness to sacrifice for each other. Cassie proved that by giving up her life savings for my life, and Lisa and Barbara proved the opposite by choosing money over human life. Well, they each made their own choices, and everyone got what they deserved. And now, dear listeners, I'd like your opinion. Do you think I did the right thing by filing for divorce and asking for compensation? Or should I have forgiven the affair and tried to keep the family together? Have you faced situations when close people showed their true face at critical moments? And how do you think, is it possible to forgive someone who is ready to let you die for the sake of his comfort? Write in the comments, share your stories. I'm really interested to know how you would act in my place. And if this story made you think about who you can call a real family, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Take care of those who are ready to sacrifice everything for you. There are very few such people in life.